2021. Thank you. It is July 28th, 2021. It's 4:02 p.m. and I will call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Lake County Board of Adjustment.
Kayla?
Yes. Yes, Paul.
Kayla?
Yes. Can you hear me? Amy, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kayla.
You can?
Kayla?
Yes.
Yes, Paul.
Paul, can you hear me?
Yeah, Kayla, I can hear you, but I can't hear, but
Kayla?
apparently Paul can't.
You.
Okay. Give me just a minute to make sure Paul's got audio.
Yeah, that was on my end.
Okay. Are you good now, Paul?
No.
Okay, well, you answered, so that's a good sign.
Be truthful.
Okay. So it's 4:03 p.m. on July 28th, 2021. We will call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Lake County Board of Adjustment. Can I please get a roll call of board members, Paul? Or do you want me to do that?
Yeah, you have Amy Tate,
Here.
Mark Wadsworth.
Here.
Larry Markham,
Yes.
and who am I missing?
Me.
Yep.
Oh, and Kayla Marcella. You're
Yeah.
here, right?
Yeah, I'm here. All right.
Maybe not. No.
Okay.
And we don't have any minutes, do we?
Can I please get an approval or any addition to the agenda, please?
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay.
Second.
All right. So I have an approval or a motion and a second. Any further discussion? No? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We do not have any minutes today or any old business today, so we're going to hop down to item number 6, which is new business. Today we will be hearing file number 21-16. This is the Taco Bell sign height variance. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff, but do want to take just a moment to talk a little bit about the process today. Today we will hold a public hearing for this variance request. And so we will have a presentation by staff, followed by the applicant. And then at that point, we will open the public hearing for public comment. Once we have received public comments, then we will close the public comment portion of the public hearing. And the board will have an opportunity to deliberate on the file that has been requested for us to consider. And after we make a deliberation, we will have a vote. If you have a public comment at the public input portion of the public hearing, please present your information. If someone else has presented information that is consistent with what you were planning to present as your public comment, please acknowledge that so that we can continue to move through the public comments with as much efficiency as possible. So with that, I will open the public hearing at 4:06 p.m. and I will hand it over to Paul Clarkson, who is our staff, to present the variance request to us.
Thank you, Kayla. I'd like to add a little bit to your list. I think we'd like to try and keep public comments to around 3 minutes. And I think I'd like to suggest that there is a level of decorum of having a public meeting, that there is really no discussion between the public and the members of the board or me. You get your chance to speak, and unless the chairman okays it, you don't get to speak again. So with that, I will say that this particular variance request is associated with a subdivision into two lots. This is the old bowling alley site that's going to be subdivided into two lots. There are conditions associated with that, and that has I believe the applicant is diligently working on that. It's also had a conditional use permit review and approval for a drive-through restaurant, and then an approval for the planning commission for a site plan review. All of those conditions are all the same for all three applications, and they are in the staff report as Exhibit A. The code section, the code section, and that's you, I think. That's, yeah. The code section on variances is Exhibit B. The code section concerning how to apply for a sign permit is Exhibit C, and the sign code itself is attached as Exhibit D. I think it's a very short statement as to what the application is. It is the Turner Management Company is proposing a 45-foot tall pylon sign depicting the Taco Bell logo at the northeast corner of the subject property. The proposed face of the sign is is to be 150 square feet. I think what I'd like to do at this point is something that I don't often do, but I think in this point, at this point, it is important that I do. I'd like to talk a little bit about what a variance is and what it is not. A variance, and this is coming directly out of the staff report, so many of you that have this can read along if you like. A variance should be granted only if strict application of the regulation due to the unusual characteristics of the property existing at the time of the enactment of the regulation would result in a peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties or exceptional and undue hardship upon the owner. So what do we mean by undue hardship? This is a pretty severe term, actually. It's a special or specified circumstances that are particularly or fully exempt a person from performance of a legal obligation so as to avoid an unreasonable or disproportionate burden or obstacle. So it's an obligation for which is not proportion or in proportion to the reciprocal cost or benefit. So it's a tough threshold to actually meet. Synonyms for undue hardship include statements like excessive, extreme, improper, unreasonable, unjustified. It is absolutely more than just awkward or inconvenient. Taken at face value, the requirement to accommodate up to the point of an undue hardship might be thought of as a ferocious obligation. Hardship means severe suffering or privation, severe toil or suffering, extreme privation. Lately, it's my understanding that the courts have somewhat softened their interpretation of what undue hardship is, and it may additionally be seen that the term peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties could be somewhat softer still. There are some undue hardship does not equal inconvenience. It's an increased cost or loss of an amenity are hardships, but are unlikely to be sufficient reason on their own. There are always some questions.
I'll move into the Zoom room, okay?
There are some questions that one should always ask in considering a variance, and this is not just members of the Board of Adjustment, but it is all of us. Number one, can the subject property be reasonably used under the existing zoning code? I'd probably have to say, yeah, it can be reasonably used under the existing zoning code. What impact will the proposed variance have upon the physical environment of the area? High, moderate, minimal? I think it would be at least moderate, particularly with a sign that is intended to be lit over all through the night, because a restaurant is intended to be a 24/7 restaurant. It could even have a high impact. What impact will the proposed variance have upon the character and the quality of the neighborhood, aesthetic considerations, views, etc.? High, moderate, minimal. Depending on your interpretation of that, it's probably moderate, if not already high. What are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions that exist in conjunction with the subject property, including size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings, which would cause undue hardship or involve practical difficulties if the code were strictly enforced? Probably not much. The difficulty of the applicant must be unique and not be a result of the applicant's own action. Will the strict application of the code deprive the applicant of privileges possessed by owners of other property in the same land use designation and vicinity? That again is a little bit hard to interpret. Like I said, hardships are not easy to comply with. Our hardships are not easy to prove or disprove. Will the granting of said variance be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property or improvements of the vicinity or land use designation in which the subject property is located? Well, it'll certainly have an effect. Whether it is materially detrimental or injurious to the property or other properties, again, subject to interpretation. Will the variance being requested ensure existing and proposed uses can be supported by infrastructure and resources and will not create hardships for future citizens? I guess I would have to say that taken in conjunction with one another, infrastructure and resources will not be affected by this, but there may be undue hardship for future citizens. Might the requested variance result in a precedent in which other similarly zoned properties will ask this for the same consideration? Insofar as variances are variances from the regulation, they technically don't set a precedent, but it doesn't mean people are going to not ask. So the variance code guidelines for particular hardship and practical difficulty criteria are something else that I want to discuss a little bit. Seeking a variance is a legal process that allows property owners to build structures or use land in a way that is contrary to the local zoning regulations. Variances are meant to be used sparingly. Granting a variance should be based on practical difficulty or particular hardship that is directly related to the property and the related uses. It is unfortunate that there is more information about what is not a practical difficulty or a hardship than there is to define one. It's probably because there is an infinite number of variance possibilities or scenarios. In trying to define a practical difficulty or particular hardship, the person making the decision on whether or not to support the variance will need to evaluate if, one, the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations governing in the district in which it is located. And number two, the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances, and that variances, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. Furthermore, the Board of Adjustment must also consider other standards prescribed in the zoning code when deciding on variances. That the particular physical surroundings, shape, and topographic condition of the specific property involved would bring particular hardship upon the owner as distinguished from a mere inconvenience, if the strict letter of the regulation were to be carried out. 2, that the conditions upon which the petition for the variance is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same zoning district. Some of these, I think that I'm reading off to you, I do discuss later on in the staff report, and I will be getting to those in a moment. That the purpose of the variance is not based exclusively upon a desire to make more money out of the property. Number 4, that the alleged difficulty or particular hardship has not been created by any person presently having an interest in the property or by the applicant. That a proposed variance will not, A, impair adequate supply of light or air to adjacent property, not likely, substantially increase the hazard from fire or other dangers to said property or adjacent property, not likely, otherwise impair public health, safety, comfort, morals, or general welfare of the inhabitants of the jurisdiction. You might hear some people that will say that that is so. D, diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. Not likely, but you might hear some evidence later tonight that it does impair property values. Unduly increase traffic congestion in public streets and highways, create a nuisance, or result in increase in public expenditures. None of those appear to be the case. I do want to point out that the Supreme Court has defined a variance as an authority to a property owner to use the property in a manner that is forbidden by the ordinance. Owners seeking variances are expected to bear a high burden of proof. Variances are meant to be used sparingly and intentional, as suggested in a reference from a previous court case in another jurisdiction. The power of variances is to be sparingly exercised and only in rare instances and under exceptional circumstances, peculiar in their nature, with due regard to the main purpose of a zoning ordinance to preserve the property rights of others. At this point, I would like to point out the fact, as I think you'll hear from another individual, that the applicant didn't provide any justification of their own, that the justification that's being presented in this staff report is made by staff. And oftentimes what we tell people in a variance is that you want to address these things because you may not like what the staff picks to address. And so with that, I'd like to go on to some of the criteria, the findings that the Board of Adjustment is restricted to in making a decision of whether to approve with conditions, or deny a variance. Number 1, the requested variance is consistent with the Lake County Comprehensive Plan and the purposes set out in section 1.4 of this code being the Lake County Land Development Code. I think that had the applicant done this, they would have found that this is that they fairly positively react to this condition, or to this special approval criteria. It does. We think it will attract new business that builds the economic base. There is tourism marketing, business support, and the local government role in physical access asset development. We also present section 1.4 of the Lake County Land Development Code and in the staff report, and do not find that any of these statements necessarily detract from the development of the property and the proposed variance. B, there are special circumstances or conditions, such as exceptional topographic conditions, narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property that are peculiar to the land or building for which the variance is sought that do not generally apply to the land or buildings in the area. I would like to direct anybody listening to this to the discussion that I just had concerning what a variance is and what it is not. And I would point out that accordingly, by virtue of the strictest definition of topography, narrowness, shallowness of shape of the parcel, there may not be a peculiar characteristics to the land for which the variance is sought that do not apply generally to other land in the area. I would also point out that the land is adequately zoned for this proposed use, and it has received all of the necessary approvals that are required for applying it to the land. Most of the parcels so zoned, in fact, I think all of the parcels zoned this way are directly adjacent to the highway. This parcel is not. There may actually be a special circumstance or a condition that justifies the requested variance as a result. Number C, the special circumstances and conditions that account for the need for a variance are not the result of the owner's actions. I would have to say that in staff's experience, almost all variance requests to some degree, however small, are the result of the owner's actions. They bought the parcel. They didn't have to buy the parcel if it had restrictions on it that they didn't like. But again, I will point out that almost all parcels, even to a small degree, are somewhat responsible for being result of the owner's action. The special circumstances and conditions are such that strict application of the provisions of this code would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties to the or exceptional and undue hardship upon the owner of such property. Staff basically says that recognizes that not being located on the main drag, so to speak, could present practical difficulties in not being able to realize the full potential of the proposed use of the business. I would have to say, having said that it is not likely that it will result in a complete monetary loss if they were not able to advertise in the manner in which they propose. As a result, staff is actually going to propose a lesser degree that might seem to be more acceptable. Number E, the granting of the variance is the minimum necessary to relieve an applicant of the practical difficulties or the exceptional and undue hardship in the use of the land or the building. I think that the staff probably can't agree that the proposed variance is the minimum necessary to relieve the applicant of its perceived practical difficulties. It may be that something less than the full requested proposal might be seen as the minimum necessary. That's up to a discussion. Number F, the granting of the variance will not have an adverse impact upon the properties located within the written notification area defined in section 3.17. Specifically, that is properties that are within 500 feet of the boundary of this parcel. Again, staff does perceive that an adverse impact to adjacent property owners is likely should the requested variance be approved unconditionally. An internally lit sign 45 feet high is likely to be an adverse impact on one or more than just the adjacent properties. As a result, staff is suggesting an alternative. And then finally, G, in determining whether difficulties to or hardship upon The owner of the lot, parcel, or other property exists, the Board of Adjustment shall properly consider the adequacy of access to sunlight and solar energy devices on or after January 1st, 1980. Moreover, the addition of solar energy devices to a building or structure shall not necessarily be considered a structural alteration for the purpose of determining whether the building or other structure represents a non-conforming use as defined by this code. That was a section that is statutorily included in these findings. And it is probably going to be fairly easy to make that finding. However, I do say that to staff's knowledge, the applicant is not proposing any solar devices. We do suggest that given the location of the property and its perceived access to the sun, perhaps solar energy support should be considered by the applicant. I think also that the applicant's application for a variance will not have any direct effect on solar access by other properties. Now, the sign code does say no on-site sign located in any zone district shall be more than 30 feet high, nor extend more than 30 feet above the surface of the roadway as it is intended to serve. Each use shall be entitled to a sign area of 50 square feet at a minimum. Such sign area may be increased at a rate of 1 square foot of sign area per each lineal foot of street frontage in excess of 50 linear feet, up to a maximum of 100 square feet. Having measured the linear foot of street frontage, the applicant is eligible for up to 100 square foot sign. They are proposing to build 150 square foot sign. Taken all together, a business such as Taco Bell, where it is located, is permitted up to 100 square foot freestanding sign of up to 30 feet high. The applicant is requesting 45 feet high and 150 square feet, proposing a sign 50 square feet in excess of what is allowed by the code and 15 feet greater in height. This is a 50% increase in the allowed sign area and a 33% increase in the allowed height. I would like to point out that the sign code restricts pole or pylon signs to 30 feet. It does not, staff suggests that any sign in any zone district should not be allowed to exceed the allowed building height, which is 35 feet. 150 square foot sign might also be seen to be overly excessive. But if the internal lighting were to be reduced and the illumination is single-sided and directed to the east to the northeast, perhaps the sign will not be seem quite so extreme. Staff will suggest a 25% increase in sign size would be more appropriate. Now, many of you have seen fast food signs in other communities in Eagle and Summit County that are actually ground mounted and may not be much more than 10 feet high. Obviously, that will not work in the present circumstances insofar as the site is not directly on Highway 24. Absent this preferred alternative, staff does propose that a reduction or an increase in signage of 25% be allowed, and that the sign not be allowed to be any greater than 35 feet. Staff also points out that that there is a requirement by CDOT in signs that are directed to a state highway. And that should actually be a condition of approval that the applicant verify that this will not be detrimental to any CDOT requirements. And I would also state that the more restrictive between what the county allow and CDOT permit shall prevail. So what I've provided for you here are three different potential motions to be made. One of them is a motion for denial. One of them is a motion for conditional approval. And one of them is a motion for unrestricted approval. I will say that under the conditional approval, the conditions that are suggested here by staff are absolutely subject to amendment by the Board of Review. The Board of Review can eliminate any one of those suggested conditions. It can also amend any one of those suggested conditions. The Board of Review can add whatever conditions it the Board of Adjustment can add any kind of condition that it so sees to be appropriate. I also, in closing, I would like to say that in the suggested motion for denial, that the list of criteria that are here are being shown to be in the negative. I think that if that is the motion that you are deciding to do, you need to pick one or more of those criteria and demonstrate why the criteria is not being met. With that, I'd like to entertain any questions from the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you, Paul. Does anybody have any of the board members have any questions for staff on the presentation of the application?
I don't at this time.
Okay. Mark and Larry, are you good to move to the applicant's portion?
So what's the, sorry, Mark,
No, go ahead.
what's the process here? What do we hear from Ryan and, or do we?
The process, Larry, was outlined by Kayla. And that the next step is that we'll hear from the applicant and their presentation.
And then will we have,
And then the Board of Review will have an opportunity to ask the applicant any questions that they want, that they may have.
okay, thank you.
And
I'm
then the
good at
board
this
will
point.
open it up to public
Right.
hearing and comment. And after that public hearing and comment has been closed, the Board of Review will be able to ask the applicant or staff any clarifications that they might need to have.
Thank you.
You okay, Larry?
Yes,
Okay.
so I'm good to move forward.
Okay, so we will move at this time to Rayanne to give us an applicant's presentation. So if you'd like to present to us, Rayanne, that'd be great. Rayanne, it says that you're muted on the phone, so you might have to press *6.
There you go. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to share my screen so you guys can, share my video so you guys can see me, but it doesn't appear to be working. Would you guys be okay with sharing my screen so I can present to everyone?
Kayla?
I believe that you have the access right now to share your screen. You should be able to. There you go. Now we can, it's starting. There we go. Thank you.
Perfect. I just want to make sure that was okay. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for hearing our application today. And thank you, Paul, for introducing the case and what we are proposing. So a lot of this might be repetitive, so I won't spend too much time on it. But I represent the property owner and operator for the Taco Bell. And they are a group based out of Colorado with the operating team, one of them living in Leadville, Colorado. Today we're requesting a sign height variance due to the location of the property itself. As Paul mentioned, we're requesting a 45-foot tall pylon sign code restricts no more than 30 feet high and no greater than 35 feet high with the building. If anyone attending the call isn't familiar with the property, on the screen I'm showing where the subject property is located. It is a setback approximately 20 feet from Highway 24 behind businesses such as the City on a Hill Coffee, as well as Mountain Laundry, just across from the Come and Go. The location of the pylon sign that we're discussing today would be in the northwest corner of our property, angled to face Highway 24, as you can see on the screen here.
I'd like to point out, Ryan, that north is to the left.
Correct. Yeah, so the site plan's kind of altered. So apologies for the confusion there. Now on my screen, you'll see the pylon sign details and specifications, such as the colors we're proposing and the wattage, lumens, a lot of just very specifics as to the lighting and just colors and specifications. I know that Paul mentioned the square footage of the sign. Our client and the operator is willing to discuss reducing the face of the sign in order to request a higher pylon than 30 feet, which I'll show images later as to why the additional height is needed specifically for this property. And I'm happy to answer questions later about any of the specifics shown on this page as well. Paul had previously walked through the criteria for the variance. And so in response to this, I just want to run through it quickly, that our requested variance is consistent with the Lake County Comprehensive Plan. It is bringing new business to Lake County to build an economic base. It is marketing towards tourism for people traveling through the town and serving potential customers there. It will economically support downtown Leadville, and this will be a physical asset to the town by improving the current property conditions and infrastructure with the development itself and the associated road improvements that were required as part of our other applications. B, there are special circumstances or conditions that are peculiar to this property. While it is not far from Highway 24, most commercial or business zoned properties are directly along Highway 24. And due to the elevation of the site, and it makes it difficult for potential customers to see the property or its signage in an efficient manner to turn into the property without having to turn around to then get to the business. C, special circumstances are not the result of the owner's actions. As we mentioned before, the operator is local to Colorado, one of them being in Leadville, and they're very familiar with the area and have always wanted to bring a Taco Bell to Leadville. They looked for many months for land to develop, and of course, we're looking directly on Highway 24. With land not being available and just looking for something in a more commercialized area, such as by the Safeway, we thought that'd be more accepting to the residents. So they proceeded with the subject property we're discussing today. D, the special circumstances and conditions are strict that they would result in any peculiar, exceptional, or practical difficulties. As mentioned before, we don't want to create any safety concerns or have a negative impact on business sales for customers not to be able to conveniently or easily see the business from Highway 24 or nearby. Granting the variance is the minimum necessary to relieve the applicant of practical difficulties. In my next slides, I'll show you some street view images showing why we believe this is the minimum necessary. And I also previously said we are open to discussing reducing the proposed square footage of the sign face as well. And then F, granting of the variance will not have an adverse impact upon the properties located in within the written notification area. Paul, we did see some of the comments received by some of the neighboring residents, and we respect your opinion. We do want to point out that this pylon will follow dark sky guidelines. It will be facing Highway 24. We don't believe it will adversely impact you. The former business that was located at the subject property is an old bowling alley, which had a pylon sign there, which exceeded the 30 feet outlined in the development code as well, which I'll show you, and was there for many years. And we're not suggesting anything greater than what was previously there with the bowling alley. So as you can see on the screen is a street view image of the former pylon that was at the subject property. In relation, you can see the large street lights, which are generally required to be approximately 30 feet tall. I unfortunately don't have the exact height of the pylon since it has been demolished, but wanted to show it as reference to the fact that the town was used to having a tall pylon on this property. Image I'm showing now is a street view just in front of Safeway as you are going southbound on Highway 24 towards Mountain View. I picked this area because it's right before a customer would have to enter into the right-hand turn lane to turn onto Mountain View. The purple arrows pointing towards our property. As you can see, it's not very visible to see the building itself, and then the pylon is visible as the former pylon is. The next image is where our larger concern is. This image is taken going northbound on Highway 24 towards Mountain View Drive. You cannot see the building at all, and you can barely see the former pylon on the property. And our fear is of customers not being able to visibly see the business. And then this final street view image is from Mountain View and Harris Avenue. So this is closer to the residential neighborhood west of the site. And as you can see, you cannot see the building nor the pylon from this view. And then another image from Harrison Ave and 17th, further and closer to the neighboring residents to the southwest. Again, pylon and building are not visible from this corner. So those are just the exhibits I was wanting to share in relation to the location of the building and our proposed pylon. And just going back to the specifications, we will meet dark sky requirements. We would really like to request a larger or taller sign than 30 feet to ensure customers can see and safely enter and exit the property. And we are willing to negotiate or discuss the square footage of the sign face. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Okay, I believe that is it for the applicant at this point. Do any of my fellow board members have any questions of the applicant on their presentation?
Let me just have one
Sure.
comment. The view that the applicant shows from Harrison Avenue by the vacant lot next to the public service building. I think we should note that that picture was taken when the bowling alley was still up. And if it was taken now, I think that sign would be visible from the residential area of that Harrison Avenue area. And one question for the applicant is that I would ask is, you said that there was no other commercial sites available for your clients to purchase other than this one. Did he consider maybe one of the commercially zoned lots that are across the street in Rail Yard? Or were they not available at the time, or what's the thought then?
They were looking at those, but I don't want to speak on behalf of my client from a financial standpoint, but from my understanding also that those aren't as far along in the planning and development process as we would have liked, as being part of a master development requires a lot more coordination. And you'd have to kind of be waiting on them to complete some of their planning and development items before we'd be able to proceed. So we are aware of the railroad development. And then in regards to the street view and the other location, Google was all street views are showing the bowling alley and were taken within the same time period. So my understanding is that the building was still standing from that street view point as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. At this point, Paul, since I don't believe that we have any further questions or comments for the applicant or staff, I would like to open the public comment portion of the public hearing at 4:48 p.m.
Hey, Kayla, I'm sorry. I thought we were just doing questions for the Brianna rather than comment. I thought we had an opportunity to comment at some point.
Yes, the board will have an opportunity to comment after we hear public comment and go into deliberation, at which point we will have an opportunity to ask staff for any kind of clarification. Paul, will we also have the opportunity to ask for clarification with the applicant?
Sure.
Okay. And the staff and the applicant can assist us once we go into those deliberations. So we'll open the public comment portion of this hearing at 4:48 p.m. Paul, if you have public comment at this point, can you please raise your hand or put into the chat that you have a public comment, and I will go through those as I see them come up on the screen and call on you one by one. We would like to keep public comments to 3 minutes per comment. And if someone has stated your public comment or something in the substantive to what your comment is, please acknowledge that so that we can continue to move forward with the hearing process. Paul, I think what I will do first is I will ask you to read into the record the public comment that you received through emails, and we will read those into the record at this time, and then I will call on those that have their hand raised, and we will go through each of you individually. So Paul, if you'll start to read those into the record, I would appreciate it.
Certainly. This one is from Roberta Seibel. I cannot attend in person to voice my objections to the proposed Taco Bell sign variance, so I am emailing you in the hopes that you will accept this. In the original application, the owners said they wanted their building to blend in with and reflect our natural building and surroundings. A 150-foot sign that exceeds every current regulation does not do that. It will be an eyesore to the neighbors and to all entering Lake County. Please do not allow this variance. And then after I made some clarifications to everybody that emailed, she responds again, thank you very much for the clarification of the variance request and current sign code. A few points I would like to make. One, I appreciate that the recommendation would be a dimmer light that only faces the business district and not residential. Number two, I still voice objection to any allowed variance, as I don't believe the owner would face any hardship operating within the current code. Number three, Leadville is a small town and large signs do not reflect our small town community feel. Number four, allowing this variance sets a precedent and will result in more variances that do not fit Leadville. Number five, with the recent rapid growth of Leadville Lake County, Now is the time to adhere more strongly to our codes, values, and ideals, not give them away. Please do not allow this variance that does not reflect Leadville. I have another one from Lauren Barrett. She says, I am unable to attend the Board of Adjustment meeting tonight, so I was wondering if the following statement could be read aloud or added to the record. Thank you. I want to express my deep disappointment in allowing Taco Bell to increase their sign size. Our community is a beautiful and quaint town that people come to escape the city or enjoy living here because it doesn't have the clutter of the city life. The fact that Taco Bell is coming to our town is already disappointing. However, given that it has already passed, I hope that we can at least uphold the zoning laws intended for our town from being covered by large unattractive signs that distract from the natural beauty of this place. I think it sets a dangerous precedent if we allow a large chain corporations to set up shop in our town and make changes to our local zoning ordinances. Please consider my perspective as a local Leadville resident. Thank you. I have another one here from Ethan Green. Ethan, are you here?
No, Paul, he is not.
Okay. Because I thought that he might actually attend as well. I am writing to register my opposition to the variance request regarding the sign for the future Taco Bell near the intersection of Mountain View and Poplar. As I read the request, it is to raise the maximum allowable height from 35 feet to 45 feet. A sign at that height will dominate the area and be quite out of place. I see no reason to allow this request, especially as the application provides no justification for this request. I respectfully suggest that this establishment look at the area and think about how they will fit in and become a good neighbor. Possibly consider a sign less than 150 square feet. Please deny this request as the applicant can easily comply with the current ordinance. I also have one here from Vicky Koch, who may or may not want to speak more to what is written. She says a sign larger than code is not necessary to bring in business. I can make this statement from a position of experience. High Mountain Pies is off the main drag. We have a sign that is something like 12 square feet, non-illuminated. Our sales are close to 2 million annual sales that Taco Bell is hoping to see. Local people will know that Taco Bell is there without a giant sign. Travelers do not need a giant sign because they are using apps like Google Maps to find a place to eat. Any variance here creates a guarantee of future variance. I believe the Taco Bell ownership team is asking for this huge variance to shock the board into compromising with a 35-foot tall, 125-foot square foot variance. The maximum height and square footage of signs is in the building codes should be upheld to preserve our skyline. And that's all I had that actually wrote something. I have three individuals that registered to be able to speak, two of them who have their hands up.
Okay, thank you, Paul. That's all the written public comment that we have received, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So at this time, I will call on Dana Green, as she was first to pop up on my screen to make her public comment. Dana, if you'd like to give your public comment at this time, you're welcome to do so. We do ask that public comment, again, is kept to 3 minutes. So Dana, if you would like to unmute yourself and make your comment, please go ahead.
Thank you, board, for taking my comment. My name is Dana Green, and I am a Leadville resident. I am speaking in opposition to the variance for the Taco Bell sign sought by the applicant. A sign of the proposed height and size would be more suitable for placement near a high-speed highway akin to I-70, not along a road where vehicles are traveling 35 to 25 miles per hour, and in particular, a road with a stoplight just prior to the Taco Bell location. A towering, internally illuminated sign would stand in glaring incongruity with those of the surrounding businesses. For example, Safeway, the sign out front is perhaps 15 feet high. Larger letters adorn the business front wall, although those have been painted in colors that reflect the mountain and rustic style that the Lake County Comprehensive Plan designates as desirable. Admittedly, Safeway has highway frontage property, but Tacos La Mina, located even further down Mountain View than the proposed Taco Bell, has a large sign but lower to the ground. It is also done in a style consistent with the comprehensive plan. Both Safeway and Tacos La Mina have signs that are easily visible and recognizable from Poplar Street. Though the staff report suggests that not being located directly on Poplar could be detrimental to the business, I do not believe the applicant would suffer significantly diminished business with a sign that fits within the current code parameters. Finally, the Taco Bell location is the northern gateway to Leadville. As such, I believe signage of any new business in this area should be held to even more rigorous standards. Taking, again, guidance from the comprehensive plan, we should be encouraging developments that improve the visual appearance of the area. If allowed, a sign of the proposed height and size would become the putative gateway sign of Leadville. This is not the entryway into our historic town that I want to see. I do not want the verbal directions to Leadville to be reduced to take Highway 91 until you get to the Taco Bell sign. I encourage the board to deny this variance application. Furthermore, I suggest that the board makes a strong recommendation to the applicant to seek appropriate sign modifications that fit our mountain town setting and reflect the historic nature of our town. Thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you, Dana. Jamie Seifer, if you can please go next.
Thank you, Commissioner Marcella. Thank you, Paul. Thank you to the Board of Adjustment. I would also like to speak in opposition of this sign variance, and I would like to request that the Board of Variance deny this application. I appreciate that Paul mentioned that variances do not typically set a precedent for other variances. I think that is a great piece of how this works. However, I do think it would at least encourage more folks to ask, and I just hope we can deny this right from the beginning. I'd like to address two particular items that the applicant was making the case for being eligible for the variance, specifically letter B. I disagree that they have a topographical disadvantage. I think the line of sight provided to the location from the highway is actually pretty good. You're looking right over the corner of Safeway's parking lot. You can see it very, very clearly. I don't think that makes them eligible for item B. Similarly, as far as access goes, I see people all the time at that intersection making an emergency left turn out of the most right lane. So as far as access goes, it's almost like our road system, just by its accidental design, is turning people towards this proposed Taco Bell location. So I don't see a detriment to their location for folks to be able to access them. I don't believe they need a taller sign to be able to be seen in enough time to make that turn. To item number C, that it is not at the owner's action that they are eligible for this variance. I very much agree with Paul when he said that they chose to buy this property. They knew what the deal was, and just that there was a variance and a tall sign before doesn't mean that that would get applied again. In that same vein, the sign for the bowling alley is kind of cool. It's like a local groovy independent business that definitely adds to the character of the town. A giant corporate Taco Bell sign does not do that. So thank you for hearing my comments, and I encourage the board to decline this application.
Thank you, Jamie. Next, we will go to Emma Collins, please.
Thank you. I'd like to echo the sentiments of Vicky Cook, Robbie Seibel, Dana Green, and Jamie Scheifer in expressing denial of the variance request. I'd like to emphasize that I feel it is unnecessary due to a lack of hardship in enforcing the current code of sign height and size. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. We'll move to Anita Harvey.
Thank you for listening and then opening it up to public comment and listening to our comments. I want to echo as well all the comments before me. Everybody has eloquently said everything that I was going to say, so I'm not going to take up too much of your time. One of the things I do want to point out is during the presentation of the applicant, she specifically said that the bowling alley sign was taller than this proposed sign, and yet she has no idea how tall that sign was. So I don't think that that's really a valid point if she has no idea how tall that sign was. She is guessing based on that. I have no idea how tall that sign was either. And honestly, that sign was a little bit of an eyesore and it was too big for the spot. I don't think that this is necessary. I do disagree with that. And I hope that the board takes the community's thoughts and hopes into this as well. We want to stay a small town. We don't want to be a big monstrosity. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Sarah Mudge.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sarah Mudge, 613 East 7th Street. I think everything that's been well articulated in against any kind of variance would also be a lot of the comments that I had hoped to hear or make, and would also encourage the board not considering any variance for the applicant and being sure that dark skies were followed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to just read one comment that I received in the chat from Chad Cole. Hi, Kayla. I am not sure how to raise my hand, but the only comment that I'd like to add in is this. Regarding item F of the approval criteria as described, won't meet dark sky guidelines. By necessity, the light will point outwards towards the highway and not down. IDSC guidelines state that the color temperature of all lamps not exceed 3000 kelvins. The pylon sign details PDF says the LEDs will be 5500 Kelvin. The sign will be on 24/7. The guidelines also state that the sign be completely extinguished 1 hour after sunset and remain off until 1 hour before sunset. Is there anyone else with us today that has any additional public comment to decide before we close the for us to hear? Okay, Scott M., please go ahead with your comment.
Yes, thank you for having me. Just wanted to raise the question of, obviously Taco Bell is moving into that location, and the question here is about the sign height and dimensions and all that. In the past, there are examples of Taco Bells, for instance, that have, let's just say, modified their overall aesthetic to fit the community in which they're located. And my comment was just for Ann. What assurances do we have that the proposed Taco Bell, including the sign and the design of it, will blend into Leadville appropriately?
Hi, Scott. Thanks for your question. At a previous public hearing, we did present the.
Sorry.
Oh, my God, what a response.
Sorry, Rayanne. We'll give you an opportunity to address those things in just a minute. We just want to collect all of the public comment during the public comment portion of the public hearing. Thanks, I appreciate it. Is there anyone else that has any other public comment at this point that is with us today that would like to raise their hand and make a public comment?
Hi there, this is Mara Gwynn, resident at 807 Elm in Leadville, Colorado. I think everything has been articulated pretty well this afternoon around why the board should deny the adjustment. And yeah, I just want to echo that as a resident, I do not think that any of the hardships Taco Bell will face in not having signage in the day and age when we have Google. If people want to go to Taco Bell when they visit our community, they will be able to find it. And as stated before, that's the gateway to our community. When you're pulling into town, you see the mountain range that makes our community iconic and livable and desirable. And giving them this adjustment to further desecrate that skyline is unreasonable and unnecessary. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mara. Is there any additional public comment? This is the last call for public comment before we close the public comment portion of the hearing. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment portion of our hearing this afternoon at 5:06 p.m. At this time, board members, we will have the ability to ask the applicant and staff any questions that we might have on the variance request. So anybody that would like to go first, you are welcome to hop in and ask questions. Rayanne, this is an opportunity to clarify anything that you may have heard in the public comments or questions that you may have come up in the public comments.
Yes, thank you to all the individuals that spoke this afternoon, Dana, Jamie, Emma, Scott, all of you. Thank you for attending today and providing us with your feedback. As mentioned earlier, we understand that the square footage of the face being 150 is pretty excessive, and we're willing to propose a smaller square footage of the face of the sign in order to get the necessary height to be visible from Highway 24. I believe we would be able to propose 70 square feet for that sign of the face. And we'd still like to request the height as mentioned previously. In regards to Scott's comments about the design of the building itself, we did present that in the former meeting, and it will have pitched roofs and mountain motif. If you look up the Frisco, Colorado Taco Bell, the exterior of the building will look very similar, if not fairly identical to that building. And I believe, I can't remember the individual's name who was speaking in regards to the kelvins and lumens for the lighting. We are happy to look into that to ensure that the kelvins do not exceed the 3,000 to meet the dark sky guidelines. We would just have to look at alternative LED bulbs to ensure that that is sufficient. We were already looking into timers for the light so we can ensure that we can turn it off or dim it as needed. So those were the only responses I had to those comments. Thank you.
Okay, staff, do you have anything to add to that before any board members have any questions?
One thing there, I saw in the comment that Sarah Mudge had pointed out that that another commissioner wrote a letter. And I'm wondering if, I know I sent this letter to all 4 of the Board of Adjustment, but perhaps maybe I should read it into the record.
Sure.
Lake County Board of Adjustment. This is dated July 24th. I would like to address file number 2116 and the variance request for signage. I am a resident of Lake County residing at 10011 Highway 24, Leadville 80461. I'm writing in my individual capacity as a resident and not an official capacity as an elected official in Lake County. I would like to present several facts relevant to the variance and relate these to the specific criteria, considerations presented in the staff report. Nearby businesses do not have signage that exceeds the code. Taco La Minas is ground mounted. The coffee shop has a sign on the building. Come and Go is relatively low and small, e.g. compared to other gas station signs further out along the commercial zone. Ace Hardware has no sign other than on their building. And even Safeway has a modest pylon mounted sign that, while raised above their parking lot, is essentially only at vehicle height on Highway 24. The presence of these nearby sign businesses that are within code argues strongly against criteria E, that any variance whatsoever is necessary to relieve the applicant of practical difficulties in the use of the land or building. Taco Bell in Frisco has only a ground mounted sign, indicating that in general, a pylon mounted sign, let alone one 45 feet high, is not necessary for business success with this brand, and therefore argues against criteria E. There is a direct line of sight from Safeway frontage portion to Highway 24 to the base of the old bowling alley pylon. There is a direct line of sight from the Highway 24 Mountain View intersection to the edge of the applicant property. Therefore, it seems that the signage on the proposed building itself or sign well within the code would be easily visible from Highway 24. This argues against criteria B, that there are any special circumstances or conditions that are peculiar to the land or building that warrant a taller or larger sign. The applicant property is on the south edge of the gateway commercial zone, and therefore much closer than many parcels in this zone to the existing residential areas in West Park to the southwest and rapidly expanding residential areas in the rail yards to the east. The proposed variance, by nature of its height, size, and illumination, is in direct line of sight and obstructs the view shed of these residential areas. This impact will only get worse if the platted rail yard residential areas is built out. This argues strongly against criteria F, that the variance will not have an adverse impact on the properties located nearby. Considering all of the above, I urge the Board of Adjustment to deny the variance application or any variance to code as suggested in the staff report. In closing, I would like to address the applicant directly. Of course, every individual and business may exercise their legal rights to the fullest under the letter of the law. However, to do so is not necessarily neighborly or wise. I urge the applicant to withdraw this variance request and furthermore to consider whether building up the maximum limit of current code is consistent with the evolving function and aesthetics of the surrounding area. Is this the business you actually want to be in Lake County? Signed, Jeff Fiedler.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. Fellow board members, this is your opportunity to ask questions. So I'll open it up to board members to start the deliberation process. Anybody want to go first? I guess I will go first, Paul. In looking at the suggested motions that staff had given us for conditions of approval or denial, my first thought is that very much is the gateway into our community, and that I believe that we're trying very hard to be very thoughtful and deliberate about the aesthetics of development in that area, and maintaining that feel as you enter the historic corridor of our downtown area. And I do have a question, because one of my concerns is the illumination of the sign. And so it's from my understanding that if you do not grant the variant request for the height and the size, there's no ability for us to condition the illumination of that sign either. Is that correct?
Who are you asking that of, Kayla?
You as staff, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, actually, there are no illumination restrictions in the sign code. So technically, yes, I don't think that you could require that if the variance is denied, I don't think you can further restrict what is allowed by the sign code. Having said that, I think the applicant is probably going to hear and is hearing the concerns and voiced by the members of the public, that a bright sign is something they don't want to see. And I suspect that they probably will do their best to keep it from being too bright.
So sign code says right now, if they didn't ask for a variance, that they could have an illuminated sign on both sides. It could operate 24/7. It could be 30 feet tall and 100 square feet. That's correct, right? That's what sign code says right now?
Yes.
Okay. So since the applicant has offered to be dark sky compliant through their site plan and their conditional use plan, would that apply to this sign as well, or no? I mean, since they've already offered that as a condition of approval with their site plan, Does that have any bearing on this being part of the dark sky compliance?
I think not directly, but perhaps indirectly. Because I think that the sign, that it could be seen that the signage needs to comply with dark sky principles. But I also think that the sign code isn't specific enough itself to be able to require that. So I'm tending to think that the sign code would apply here more than would the site plan review conditions of approval.
Well, in order for the site plan to be approved, it's got to comply with the dark sky conditions, regardless of what an ancillary sign code may call out. I mean, that's part of the condition for the original approval.
Of their original site plan, right, Larry?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the sign code's going to be subordinate to that.
Yeah,
What does that mean with that dark sky compliance in their site plan in relation to the sign variance?
Well, you can't be, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Larry.
Well, I was just going to say you can't be dark sky compliant if you're complying with the maximum allowable within the sign code.
If
that-
the sign is a part of the site, doesn't that make the sign need to comply with what the site plan has been conditioned? The
That's my
approval
read on
has
it.
been conditioned.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you're right about that. I would like to point out, though, that the sign code is not really ancillary in this case. It is primary. It is the sign code that they have applied for a variance from. They didn't apply for a variance from the site plan review, which they can't do.
Still, they can't put up a sign if they don't get their site plan approved.
But
And approval is contingent upon the dark sky piece.
isn't part of the approval of the site plan, isn't a condition of that getting your approval for your signage?
Yeah, getting it, the site plan approval requires that a variance be achieved for the sign that they want.
Or they have to just go by what is in the code?
Right. And I'm quite sure that the applicants are not going to want to exceed dark sky principles with their sign, particularly given that that the comments that they're hearing today, plus the fact that the site plan condition requires that it be dark sky compliant.
Because one thing that, I think that stuck out to me is just because it's facing northeast doesn't mean that eventually there aren't houses over in the rail yard that out of some sort of line of sight, a few of those might still have that look. It's not going to completely, although it's looking at mostly commercial, there will still be some residential units over there that it will still affect.
I think that's a good point.
Just because they're not there now doesn't mean that they won't be in the future.
That's a really great point that I had not considered, Amy. Mark, do you have any questions right now for Paul?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay. So Paul, if there was to be a denial on the variance for the sign, what could, I just want to make sure that it's like, for full disclosure and full transparency, the applicant could construct a sign, but it would still need to maintain dark sky compliance because of the site plan condition.
Yes, they could build it 30 feet high, and they could build a 100 square foot sign.
Okay.
I think you may recall in the recommended conditions of approval that I had suggested that only one side of that sign be illuminated. I think that I probably would still request of the applicant that that one side still be dark because it faces West Park, I presume. And that would be probably as they apply, if they get denied this variance request, I will be discussing that fact with Ryan and who she represents about which way to face the sign, what she really wants to do, and based upon what she's heard here today.
Okay. So our voting board members today are Amy, Mark, and myself. I'm sorry, Amy, did I cut you off?
No.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Amy or Mark, do either of you have any further questions, comments, concerns, or is anybody ready to take an attempt at a motion?
Kayla, would you be so good as to appoint Larry a voting member today?
Yes. Do we need to make a vote of that?
No, that's just your appointment.
Okay. Larry, we will appoint you today as a voting member on this application.
Okay.
All right. Larry, do you have any further questions, comments, concerns for staff or the applicant at this point?
I want to thank Brianne for taking the time to present her perspective to us all, and also to our community members for their articulate expression of their concerns.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
Sure. I move we decline the request for a variance.
All right, just one moment here.
Larry, I provided you in the staff report with 3 formats of a motion.
Right. One of them was decline. One was
Yes.
accept, and one was conditionally accept.
We have to read it as it's been presented.
Yeah, we have to read the statement of the motion as it's been presented in the staff report.
Okay, let me pull it up.
You know, what also could happen is that I could read that motion into the record for you, and any one of the 4 of you could say so moved.
Yeah, Paul, why don't you do that?
I move the Board of Adjustment deny file number 21-16, an application from Taco Bell for a variance from the strict enforcement of section 6.14 of the Lake County Land Development Code concerning signs at the currently addressed site of 1717 Poplar Street, finding that
So moved, and I would select D. And thank you for reading that in.
I don't think it's just.
No, Larry, he's going to read all of the finding criteria
Yes.
under the select motion.
I'm going to read.
All right.
We have to make findings on all of them, Larry. And I think what I'm going to do is
It says at least, I'm sorry, Paul, it just says at least one criteria.
Yes. And so in other words, if you find one of the criteria to be negative, then the application fails.
Can be.
But the bottom line here is that I'm going to read these in a positive manner. And if you want to amend the regulation to one of these being a negative, I want to be sure that you discuss why you want that to be in the negative.
Okay.
Does everybody understand that?
Yep. So Paul, why don't you read all of those criteria into the record and then we will go from there.
The requested variance is consistent with the Lake County Comprehensive Plan and the purposes set out in section 1.4 of this code. There are special circumstances or conditions such as exceptional topographic conditions, narrowness, shallowness, or shape of the specific piece of property that are peculiar to the land or building for which the variance is sought that do not apply generally to the land or buildings in the area. C, the special circumstances and conditions that account for the need for a variance are not the result of the owner's actions. D, the special circumstances and conditions are such that the strict application of the provisions of this code would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties, or exceptional and undue hardship upon the owner of such property. E, the granting of the variance is the minimum necessary to relieve the applicant of the practical difficulties to or exceptional and undue hardship in the case of the land or building. F, the granting of the variance will not have an adverse impact upon the properties located within the written notification area defined in section 3.1.7. And G, in determining whether difficulties to or hardship upon the owner of a lot, parcel, or other property exists, the Board of Adjustment shall properly consider the adequacy of access to sunlight for solar energy devices installed on or after January 1st, 1980. Moreover, the addition of solar energy device to a building or other structure shall not necessarily be considered a structural alteration for the purpose of determining whether that building or other structure represents a non-conforming use as defined by this code. So somebody says so moved, and then somebody says second, then you can go ahead and make adjustments as you so choose to that motion.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion on the motion on the floor or the conditions of the motion for denial?
I found several things that it was not consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Agreed.
Specifically in section 1.4. I can name them more if.
Yes, would you please?
Specifically 1.4.4, 0.6, and 0.7. I felt like this does not protect and enhance the county's natural and visual environment. I felt like this does not promote compatible land use relationships and prevent adverse environmental impacts because of the fact that nobody else around it has these type of signs either. So it doesn't seem compatible. And then promote predictability, consistency, and efficiency in the land development process for residents, neighborhoods, businesses, agricultural and development interests. This is, I think, like we've said a couple of times, that even though it supposedly doesn't create a precedent, I believe that it will create more requests for variances and the like up and down Highway 24 in our, areas that maybe we don't, our view sheds and that sort of thing.
So what I would suggest that is what you're suggesting is that section 1.4, several items on that section 1.4 of the code are not compliant with the proposal. So what that would mean is a condition or a criteria. A, the requested variance is not consistent with the Lake County Comprehensive Plan and the purposes set out in section 1.4 of this code. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think so. The part of this that I think some people seem to be sort of meshing together is the part of the comprehensive plan where it's talking about attracting new businesses and that sort of thing. That's a whole separate issue. I think that has nothing to do with the sign. And so that's why I didn't really zone in on that. And, questions about the design of the building and stuff, I think is not for us to discuss in this format. That's already been discussed with their conditional use permit and that sort of thing. And so that first part of section A that was sent out in the staff packet, all of those things could be justified or not justified with the approval of the site plan. They don't really have anything to do with the sign itself. So I don't know if we just have to refer to section 1.4 or we have to
No.
lump it all with the comprehensive.
No, it all gets lumped together. It's all
Okay.
one finding that gets made. So I would suggest that you move to amend the motion that
Okay.
changes that finding to the negative.
Okay, I'll move to amend the motion to change item A to the negative.
Second.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, any further motion or discussion on that motion to change that finding? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Finding B, or are there any
No.
additional oh, sorry,
We
go
don't,
ahead.
we don't need to go through all the rest. One is enough to,
Okay.
to find for denial.
Okay. All right, so this variance request has been denied. At
No,
this
no,
point.
you've
Oh,
voted,
sorry.
you voted on the amendment to the
Okay.
motion to deny. Now
Okay.
you have to move on the actual motion.
Okay, so we do have the motion on the floor for actual denial of the application. With the finding that the variance is not consistent with the Lake County Comprehensive Plan and the purposes set out in section 1.4 of that code. Any further discussion on that motion for denial based on the criteria that it is not consistent with the Lake County Comprehensive Plan? No? All right, seeing no further discussion on the motion on the floor, all those in favor? Aye.
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 All right. So Paul, I think at this point that concludes our hearing today.
It does.
All right. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Board members, do you have any additional comments or anything at this point before we move to adjourn?
I have nothing.
By me.
Amy?
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today. We will adjourn this evening, this meeting of the Board of Adjustment at 5:34 p.m.
Thanks.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Goodbye. Ryan, are you still there? No, you're not. Oh yeah, Ryan, call me tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.